Good morning, everyone. This is T. Falcon Napier. Welcome to day 2 of ChangeWorks Essentials. Today we're going to be talking about the engagement layer in a bit more detail, and I'm going to introduce the comprehensive adjective map to all of you. And then we'll start talking about desired locations on the change grid, and ultimately how you go about moving someone from wherever they are on the grid to wherever it is you really want them to be on the grid. Now, last time we were looking at Stephen's change grid, and we'd already looked at the different levels of tension. We'd looked at the different energies. Let me swap out the background. You can see this. So we talked in some detail about these 16 different energies. And then I said that today we would move on to the engagement. And so let's just rewind ever so slightly so I can make sure everyone's up to speed on these energies. The ChangeGrid, again, is not a personality typing tool. Please don't ever confuse it with one, and don't let anyone get confused with it. Do not put the ChangeGrid in the same bucket as psychometric tools go, because that's not what this is really all about. The ChangeGrid is a tool that allows us to focus on specific activities the client chooses, and it reflects what's going on in their head right there around that. So I'm not trying to do anything to map their brain and tell you what personality or temperament or preferences or what. I'm not trying to do any of that at all. I'm just saying, you know what? When it comes to this specific activity, this is how this person happens to be responding at this particular moment in time. And so we want people to view this more as a tool rather than a test. So even though you see us using labels on this energy level that come from that world of psychometric profiling, don't let it get into that bucket. We talk about these labels as being an energy that someone's experiencing around the activity rather than as like a personality type or something like that. And so I said to you guys that Stephen is showing himself to be a driven driver. So this is someone who's determined to do something, and they're going to do it by just doing it, pushing it forward on activity number 14. And activity number 14, if we scroll up a little, was handling difficult prospects. Now, he also had a lot of things plotting, quite far down grid where the analytical energy becomes predominant. And we're going to talk a little bit more about these specific plottings on the next layer of the change grid for you as well. So does anyone have any questions, thoughts about the 16 energies? No? Okay, in the event you go through layer by layer, obviously we spend a lot of time on this particular layer. And later on today, we're going to be getting into the adjective map. And the adjective map is going to, or very much give you guys a lot of detail around this as well. Now, the comprehensive adjective map is a massive, massive document. If you attempted to print the whole thing out, it's some 3 feet by 3 feet. And so to make the tool something that you can practically use, we have instead zoomed in to different locations on the change grid. Let me just shrink this a little bit so you can see what's going on. And so this little zoom right now, I'm on page 1 of it, but that page 1 isn't important. I'm just showing you a page real quickly to orient you. We've just kind of zoomed in. So this page is just zooming in on that very far upgrid subquadrant. So that expressive quadrant. If we go several pages forward through that, you'll see that we're just kind of, moving around on the change grid, zooming into each of its different subquadrants. So here we are. Whoops, back a little bit. Back. Sorry. We've zoomed in here on the driven driver, and that's where Stephen had that activity number 14 about dealing with difficult prospects. So let me tell you very quickly where the adjective map comes from, and then let me tell you how to use it, and then we'll get into the next layer for you. So as I said to you, the change grid is the result of combining literally hundreds of maps of humanity into a single map. So it's taken us, 30 plus years to get the change grid to where it is today. That means that we have been very meticulous in seeking out what these maps are like and trying to figure out how the maps overlay on the change grid, and then looking at the descriptors that whoever developed that particular map of humanity used, and all the different adjectives they used to describe each of the different types that they were, saying the population contained. And so if you do that model after model after model, you end up looking at this reduction of all of their thoughts to nothing but the adjectives used to describe each of their different types. It's something very interesting happens, and that is that these adjectives start to get duplicated in model after model after model. And as they get duplicated, they start to shift into increasingly specific locations on the change grid. And that has evolved to what you're seeing here today. So what you're seeing here today are all of the adjectives that the models we've explored have contained. And those adjectives have now been scrutinized and shifted into the exact location it belongs to on the change grid. So now, if you guys are interested in adjective mapping, when we get into comprehensive adjective map, when we get into the change grid layer by layer, we do talk about the adjective mapping process, and we actually let you play with some maps of humanity and see how you would fare at doing whatever the physical manipulations are to get it to overlay on the change grid. Sometimes you have to rotate it, sometimes you have to flip it. So there's just some gymnastics that sometimes have to be performed in order to get things to overlay. But almost every single time we've even attempted a merging, it's happened. So so we want people to have that experience so they can get the hang of, or at least understand what we did in order to bring the change grid to the point you see it today. Now, our goal is to create a comprehensive adjective map. And in this adjective map, we want to have a grand total of 1,440 adjectives. That would be 10 adjectives for each of the squares that the change grid contains. Now, right now we've got about 1,000 or so, I think. So we're still hunting for that last batch of adjectives, but we got plenty, plenty, plenty to work with, more than anyone needs. Now, how do you use the adjective map? To use the adjective map, you look at the coordinates that the person reported on their change grid. So let me just flip to a second here, back to Stephen's change grid. And you can see right now for activity number 14, which again was dealing with difficult prospects, Stephen is plotting at an ability of 10 and a challenge of 10. So 10 and 10 is right here where you see number 14 plotting right now. Now, that happens to be in this driven driver subquadrant. And again, we're going to go back now to the adjective map. And I just want you to see how this, we're really looking at the exact same spot on the change grid, the driven driver. We're just going to zoom in and we're going to see these lists of words in all these different boxes. So let's go back to his grid now for just a second. What did I click on? I think I want this one. Yeah. And let me zoom in a little bit. Well, let me show you. So up here in the corner, it says this is the outgrid quadrant, and it's the outgrid section, also known as the driven driver. That's what we've zoomed in on here, the driven driver. And now we see all these different words. And right here, you see coordinates 10, 10. In fact, let me zoom in a little bit. And let's see if this helps you guys see. Oops. Oh, wow. Sorry. Da 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 da. When you're magnifying and scrolling, it can be quite the eyeful. Okay, gently bring it into play. Oop, too far. Gentle, gentle. Oh, too far. Oh, wow. All right, I guess it's close enough. It's being really fussy with me right now because it's such a giant document. All right, so we've just zoomed in. We are looking at the driven driver subquadrant, and there's coordinates 10, 10. And again, Stephen has activity number 14 dealing with difficult prospects plotting right there. So how it works is you go to the coordinate pair, and then you read the adjectives that are surrounding those coordinates. Now, as you read those adjectives, you're going to feel that some of them apply, some of them resonate, and others don't. The ones that do are the ones that we want you to focus on. The ones that don't, feel free to just set aside. So there's multiple ways that life can express itself at these different coordinate pairs, but there's not an unlimited way that life can express itself at a given coordinate pair. And so we just want to go like, okay, what could be happening here with Stephen? Now, so again, picture Stephen is standing right there at that coordinate pair, coordinates 10, 10. So here are the adjectives that Stephen could be experiencing. Now, he could be feeling about, again, this is about dealing with difficult prospects. He could be feeling aggressive, demanding, dominating, forceful, manipulative, relentless, unsympathetic. He'd be, in that case, leaning out grid. Remember, the further out grid we plot, the more driven the person becomes. The more driven they become to accomplish whatever that task may be, the less and less concern they place upon the individuals around them. And so as you move further and further out grid, and you get where we're looking at right here, leaning there, we've got something here we really want to be on the lookout for. So I don't know if those words apply. I hope they don't. Now, let's go back to the center here, 1010. Let's look what happens if Stephen is leaning a little bit on the in-grid side of things, a little bit towards amiable. In this particular case, the adjectives would be like accomplished, authoritative, directive, in charge, leading, powerful, proud, reality based, risk oriented, tenacious. Now, how many of you would say that when it comes to dealing with a difficult prospect, that this set of adjectives would be a lot better than the other set I just read to you: aggressive, demanding, dominating, etc.? So how many of you go ahead and type something to me? Again, if you guys want credit for attending the program, gotta know. Yeah. So we don't really want someone who is at coordinates 1010 to be leaning in the out grid or in the driver energy direction. He's already a driven driver. We don't need him to become an increasingly driven driver, you know? We'd like him to keep a little bit of amiable energy around it. And so an amiable driven driver. Now, we don't know if that's the perfect energy for him around it, but I just want you to kind of understand how the change grid would apply. And so while everything I know about power would apply, because obviously this spot is in power, the adjective map allows me to get pretty granular about what is actually happening at that spot, that specific spot on the change grid. Now, if he's leaning a little bit up grid, so he's got a little bit of that expressive energy coming in third place, so tertiary energy, the words now become abrupt, competitive, controversial, impatient, pioneering, pushy, resourceful, and visionary. Now, as I read those words, I think, well, some of those could be pretty good and some of those could be problematic. And so I think if you're dealing with a difficult prospect, it might be fine to come across as resourceful and visionary. Yep, I think those would be okay. The rest I'd kind of go like, not so sure, not so sure. Now, maybe competitive would be good if the reason why the pushback is about, some sort of competitive situation. So that one might be okay. Now, it's also possible that you're leaning down grid, you're leaning towards the analytical energy, in which case now the adjectives become frank, headstrong, narrow, opinionated, outspoken, resistant, and strict. Not really thinking those would serve us well. So, boy, I'm hoping he's leaning on the in grid side of things. So, those amiable energies are at least there to keep things nice and diplomatic, and maybe a little bit of that upgrade energy, that expressive energy, so that he maintains sort of a positive feel around the whole thing. That he sees the vision, being resourceful. You know, that would be the leanings. But boy, I would hate for him to be at this spot and leaning either outgrid, so he becomes increasingly driven, or downgrid, where the analytical starts coming into play, which has probably become quite argumentative there. Okay, so now how you use it though is you go to the coordinate pair and you read all of the adjectives that are surrounding it, and as you read them, you ask your client which of these feels best to you. And you don't need to read all of them. And again, at a certain point, there's going to be 10 words in every single box. That's a lot of words to be rattling off at somebody. And so this is where we've always said that for someone to do a really good job of reading a change grid, they need an equal blend of intelligence and intuition. And so, yeah, we want you to have enough concrete understanding of the change grid so that you can, use these sorts of reference tools to help you get a good deal of the way to those insights and understanding. But ultimately, you are the one that is engaging this person in dialogue, and you are picking up on the energy that they are giving off around this. And so you're hearing a lot more than words. You're picking up all sorts of subtleties and nuances, nonverbals in their overall communication. So we want you to use your intuition and say, what is it that I'm feeling? As I'm resonating with my client, I'm picking up on things. What is it that I'm feeling? And as you do that, as you read these words, you kind of go like, yep, that one feels right. That one feels right. So as I'm using this with a client, I might just suggest certain of these adjectives to them and say, are you feeling right now a little more? And then give them a few and see where they go. Or I could also say to them, tell me a little bit about what you're feeling right now. So, what adjectives would you use to describe your attitudes, your beliefs, your behavior right now? And don't be at all surprised if they start to use some of these adjectives you see surrounding that coordinate pair. And so this map we find to be the most comprehensive and useful reference tool that we've ever developed. That's why we've never really developed reference tools for each of the layers. We developed one for the 5 levels of tension because very often when we're teaching this program at the consumer level or to groups of managers in rather short programs, we don't have time to get into the details that we've gotten into on this series of calls. So we just want to keep things nice and simple. Here's the 5 levels of tension, and here's a little reference sheet for that. But beyond that, our advice to the professionals is don't trouble yourself with individual reference guides for each of the change grid layers. What we want you to get comfortable with is the adjective map, because the adjective map is the result of mapping out all of those layers and superimposing them and letting all those adjectives just settle down into the best place they can be on the change grid. Now, the rest of adjective mapping, though, involves the testing process. And in the testing process, what we do is say, all right, this is where, according to all the model makers, this adjective would fall. But is it just in the general vicinity of where it belongs, or is it actually in the precise location? And so here's how we go about doing that. We look at the adjective, we choose a very specific definition for that adjective out of the dictionary. So we have an official definition for each adjective, and then we ask ourselves, what is the primary energy that that adjective contains? Is the primary energy of this adjective driver, amiable, expressive, or analytical? And based on that primary energy, we are validating that it's in the overall quadrant that it belongs in. So we've narrowed the change grid now down to 1/4 of its territory to where this belongs. Then we go, well, what's the secondary energy? Is this more of a driven driver, an amiable driver, an analytical driver, or a whichever one I missed, an expressive driver energy? So now I've moved it into the sub quadrants. So now I know, for example, all these words, every one of them that you see in this whole driven driver quadrant, all of these words describe the driven driver. And then I have to say, yeah, but what's its third energy? Now let's get in more of the subtleties and nuances. So do we kind of feel that there's a little bit of amiable in this, or a little bit of driver? What's that third energy all about? And that's what allows us to move the words into the exact locations you see them in right now. Now, during this program, you're not expected to understand all of the world of adjective mapping, but if you find that material interesting, it's one of the enrichment programs that we do provide to licensed ChangeWorks professionals. And so it's really good. It helps you really understand the map, obviously, in more detail. It really helps you to get a real sense of what's happening at each of the specific locations around the change grid. But that's where you really learn about the process of adjective mapping. So for your use of it, all you need to do is keep it simple. Whenever you are looking at an activity, let's just zoom into those coordinates in this adjective map. And again, if you print this document out, it's some 16 pages long, so you got a nice handy visual guide for it. Zoom into wherever that coordinate pair is, read all the adjectives that surround it and see which ones you believe would resonate with the client. Then suggest those to the client and see if they agree with you. All that's doing is validating where you're at. Now, we can also use the adjective map to help determine ideal locations for something. So if I said to the client, this is where you're at right now, does this feel right to you? Does this match the descriptions I'm giving you? And they go, yep, 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 that matches. And then I say to them, and is that okay with you? Is that serving your greater interests? They might go like, not really. No, it's not. And so we could say to them, okay, please describe how you would be thinking, acting, feeling, whatever ring, if you were in the best sort of set of circumstances. And as they start using those adjectives, you can find those adjectives on the change grid. If you use this, by the way, online as a PDF file, it's fully searchable. So it'll actually zoom in to the actual adjective as you put them on there. Well, we also have an alphabetical list of all the adjectives that are currently on the adjective map. And so there's lots of little lookup features. So sometimes it's interesting to just say, how are you feeling? And as they start to talk about that, we know where they are on the change grid. Or we say, how would you like to be feeling instead? And they give us some descriptors and we go, okay, I know where that is on the change grid. So now it's just a matter of moving them around. Oh, what do we need to do about clients with a limited feeling vocabulary? Well, we do have a reference tool that when you send a client a change grid, you can ask the system to include a quick reference guide. It's specially designed for the client to receive. And by the way, that's that extra handout that I uploaded to the system today. It has a mini version of this adjective map. So rather than attacking them with a 16-page, 1,000 adjective, eyeful, it instead I think presents them with about 125 adjectives. It's just a really small set of them. And I think that helps people who have difficulty expressing themselves develop a little bit broader range without putting them into visual overload and obviously the overload that they're experiencing along with that. Let's see. I'm curious, would the adjective map be more of the being of the individual, which leads to the doing? Well, the adjective map is really just a reflector. It's a mirror that just says, this is where these things live on the change grid. Each one of these adjectives lives in only one spot on the change grid. And so, it's really talking about their current state. And because the change grid is all based on perceptions, this is how they're currently responding to the situation as they perceive it. Their perceptions could be distorted. We already chatted that if people are up in stress or down in apathy, then their emotional state is actually distorting reality. And so the decisions they're making are coming from this distorted sort of reality. So really the change grid is just reflecting their perceptions at this particular moment in time about that particular activity. So I don't know. Some of these adjectives are adjectives that describe someone who would be in action. Other adjectives describe something that's just an internal response. So you'll even find emotions scattered around this, or you'll find abstract concepts as well, scattered hither and yon. Okay, I'm glad you guys find this interesting. um, oh yeah, I'll get to the red words in just a second. Thank you, Ronnie. And let's see. I work with clients that English is not their first language, so vocabulary is more limited. Any translated forms? No, Bob, we do not have this in Mandarin. That would be a very interesting thing to do. You are correct that the map that we are using has to be specific to the culture that we are working in. And at present, the only adjective map we've created is one that's around English. And at first, we thought it was just going to be North American English, but we've done extensive work throughout Europe. And what we have found is that among the Europeans, and so let's say that's anywhere as far north as the Scandinavian countries, and as far south as the south of France, the bottom of Spain, Portugal, all English speakers seem to resonate with this map exactly the way that it is. So and we've also had colleagues in Australia and New Zealand, and they say the same thing. This resonates with their understanding. So it seems to be specific to the language more than the culture. That being said, I do believe that different words are going to carry different meaning in different places. So I think it's very important that you be sensitive to whatever those differences may be. We have certainly licensed people in other countries who do speak other languages primarily in the ChangeWorks system, and we know a couple of them have been developing adjective maps. One specifically in Spanish, and another one in French. And so, when those are, big enough, robust enough, well, we'll be happy to share them with people. But yeah, we made a decision early on that because our business is primarily licensing and supporting professionals, and we wanted to keep our business something that's nice and small that we can continue to do throughout our retirement years, we decided we wanted to have no more than 1,000 professionals. And truth is, we can find those thousands without leaving the borders of our own country. So let's keep it to North America. Let's keep it to some of our colleagues in Europe, and let that be enough. Let that be enough. So yeah, but I'd love to see what one in Mandarin would look like. Stephen would want one in Japanese. That's his the language he's passionate about. Okay, anyway, so that's how you use the adjective map. Again, please keep it very simple. So let's play with it one more time, one more activity, and then we'll move on to another layer. So let's see. Here's Stephen's change grid again. Now notice he has activity number 2, which is maintaining a prospect's record in Infusionsoft. Whew, this will be interesting. And he is plotting right now on the border between the driven expressive and the expressive driver. Now, those two individuals, the expressive driver energy is just a little bit heavier on the driver's side and a little bit lighter on the expressive side. The expressive driver is the flip side of that, a little more on the expressive side, a little less on the driver's side. So there's kind of like a progression that's happening as we move through these different subquadrants. So he's right there in the middle. So he's like a driven expressive driver. He's like, a total balance of all that. Um, so he's at coordinates 6 and 10. So let's go to the adjective map. Let's see if we can find coordinates 6, 10. And again, you guys really should have this printed out so it's a little bit easier than what I'm attempting to do right now. But oh, this works. So here we are. You see coordinates 6, 10. So when it comes to Stephen keeping everyone's records updated in Confusionsoft, let's look at the words that might apply. So we'll start here on the outgrid side of things. Again, the outgrid side of things is where he might be a little bit more driven around that. So eager, energizing, motivating, persuasive, purposeful, restless. This is the first red word we've seen. So let's go ahead and address that. Whenever you see a red word, what that means is that this word has been a recent addition to the adjective map, and it is currently being debated by the more senior people in the ChangeWorks community. So once we kind of think we've figured out where the adjective belongs, and we've worked ourselves through that whole adjective mapping process. We put it on the change grid, and then we say, okay, everybody, for the next 6 months or whatever, we're going to leave it red. So go ahead, play with the adjective map. And as you do that, just see if this adjective feels right there. And if at any point it doesn't, let us know, and we can take it off the list and debate it on another day, or we can lock it in and say it's fine. So all the red means is that the words are currently under final scrutiny. So when I think about this, okay, when it comes to doing this Infusionsoft stuff, based on my understanding of Stephen, and Stephen, you can certainly chime in on this if you feel so inclined. Captivating, no. Charismatic, no. Dynamic, not particularly. Energetic, no. Impressive, he could be. And smooth, well, that's when we get on his case about not updating his records. Suddenly he becomes very charismatic and very smooth. So, he's got that going on. But let's go, all right, maybe a little bit more on the in-grid side of things. Cooperative and supportive. Well, he has moments when he's very cooperative and very supportive around that. But again, you go upgrade a little bit. He's a little bit on the restless side of things, and on the downgrade, he's a little bit adventurous. Yeah, and so you really just can't. And we love him to pieces, but we just know that he's got a spirit of adventure, and being compliant is really not his strong suit. So, Stephen, are you unmuted on the call? You want to defend yourself or acknowledge the
No,
accuracy of what I've
no,
just said?
I make no I make no qualms about it. I don't like
Oh,
fitting in.
Oh wait, sorry. Yeah, someone just corrected me. I was just reading 710. Nope, 610. Sorry, he's at 610. So that changes a little bit. So now charming, convincing, jovial, promoting, and suave. So on his good day, he's purposeful, eager, energizing, motivating. Downgrid, cooperative, supportive. Ingrid, friendly, informal, popular, and warm. Oh, that is so you.
It is.
When it comes to this activity. So can he do it? Yes, he can. But does he? Is he eager to do it? I'm sorry, this outgrid word does not apply. He's not eager to do it. If he's persuading, he's trying to persuade us why it really doesn't need to be done. And he's motivating us about taking a chill pill around the whole thing. Yeah, but he's always a friendly guy, etc. Whatever, promoting whatever. Yeah, so this is actually happening. So he's just trying to schmooze his way around doing that activity. So in the long run, does this really help him get the activity done to the standard that we have set for him doing this particular activity? What would you guys guess? Is 610 a good place to be for compliance to a procedural sort of a system? What do you guess? Yeah, not so much. This is the world of, the excuse factory with the big smile on your face. Okay, so now again, because we know where Stephen plots on the change grid around this, and we know that that matches, and he's just validated for it, there's no reason for anybody to feel anything around it. We're just acknowledging this is reflecting what's going on in his head about this particular activity and how it's affecting his behavior, and many of these things there. And so we go like, all right, is that really the best place for Stephen to be for this particular activity? The answer is nah. So we got to figure out, well, where would be a better place on the change grid for Stephen to be in order to make that activity turn out. And we'll be playing with that in just a short while. Let's see, Bob's got a comment here. I guess it depends on how you define compliance. Well, he's certainly always in compliance with his own choices, his
Yeah,
desires.
I wear pants in public. That's a thing.
Yeah, we can all be glad of that. So, all right. Anyway, but we want you guys to start playing with the adjective map, but we don't want you to feel overwhelmed by it. Let it be just a simple little tool that you're just playing with. So, look at a coordinate pair, for example. We'll do one more. He's way, way down in analytical about activities number 6 and 9. So, answering people's questions and making follow-up calls. So okay, answering the prospect's questions about the research project. That's activity number 6. So let's go to the adjective map and see what's happening there. Now that's pretty much towards the end of it, towards the bottom of things. What were the coordinates, Stephen? Let's go back
For
there. Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry, everybody. It was 11 and 2. 11, oops, sorry, different thing altogether. 11 and 2. Click here. Say the magic incantation. Oh, yeah, of course, not that page. So we'll go down a little bit more. Da, 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 da. Actually, I need to go up a couple. No, 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 no. Where am I at? Oh, I'm in the amiable section. No wonder things are very strange. Yeah. Okay, Stephen, what did you do to my adjective map? How come I can't find the numbers I'm looking for? Okay, we are finishing there. I go there. This is the expressive analytical. Right. And then the next one will be the driven analytical. And then the next one's going to be the analytical. Yes, thank you. And this is where 11.2 is. Wow. Okay, so when it comes to answering people's questions about the research, I will read these words, and then you guys get to tell me whether or not you think that's a good place for this activity to be. Let's see, got a comment here from Betty about the other one. If he could think of how it would help him help his clients, he may be more motivated to complete the activity. Thank you for that input. Later on today, we're going to be talking about how do we move people around. And what you are actually doing is suggesting what we will label later today as being a change grid maneuver. It's a little bit of a down grid maneuver and a little bit of an out grid maneuver. So trying to simplify the task, but get them focused on what the real reason behind this behavior is. And you're absolutely right. Absolutely right. It could help him, it could help the client. Exactly right. Okay, so this other activity, answering the client's questions, he's plotting down, 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 deep down in apathy. He is an analytical. That's where we're zoomed in now. And he's plotting right here at 11.2. So here's the adjective set for answering questions people have about the research project. And I'm just going to start out grid and work my way around it. Distant, evasive, guilty, persecuted, private, unforgiving, despondent, remote, moody, negative, aloof, apathetic, lethargic, discerning, economical, hesitant, pessimistic, reserved, and skeptical. So let's see. As I've observed Stephen answering people's questions, I would say that he comes across as being economical because he has very direct answers to whatever their questions are. We don't get asked new questions. We get asked the same old questions over and over again. And quite literally, every question anyone asks us is answered on the page we put together describing the research. And so it really is just this being economical, giving it to them. I'm sure he feels a little bit hesitant because there's got to be this feeling of, oh God, why didn't they just read what was right in front of them? Who knows? And so a little bit apathetic about it because it's just something that's so routine, so done. I hope he's not moody or negative about it. Again, he tends to be overall a very upbeat, energetic, positive kind of person. So if he is that, he doesn't exhibit it. Distant, evasive, guilty, persecuted, private, or unforgiving, nah, none of that would apply. So I think Stephen is more on the, let's say, more on the upgrade side of things. So he's a little bit more on the expressive side. So an expressive-ish analytical. So does he do it? Yep. Very discerning, gives them the information they've asked for, does it in a way that's very economical. He's quite reserved around it, and I'm sure he's feeling a little bit apathetic around it. That might even be too strong of a word to describe it. Stephen, does that feel like a fair assessment for your
Uh,
mindset around answering people's questions about the research project?
that's probably pretty good.
Yeah. All right. And so now the question for all of you guys to answer is, do you believe that that is a good place for someone to be on the change grid when it comes to answering questions that people might have about a research project? What would you guys guess? Is that bringing out the okay? Yeah, okay. Let's see. Deb's got a comment here. It sounds okay, but not energized. So, will he do a perfectly adequate job? Yes, he will do a perfectly adequate job. But is he leveraging that actual opportunity to speak to someone? I mean, most of the people that participate in the research find themselves on that research page through some invitation that they received or whatever. And when they have a question, they actually contact us. We actually get to talk to somebody. And so, I think that there's a lot of opportunity there. So let's see, Ronnie's sharing here. Not so much, not great for the receiver. Yeah, because it'll be, again, it's going to be one of those very, here's your answer, here's where you can find it. And it'll be perfectly, diplomatic and all that. And knowing Stephen will have a smile on his face while he's doing it. So the energy would be there. But his energy could be used better, doing something else. And isn't that an interesting thing? Stephen is not down in apathy about, or Stephen himself is not down in apathy. This activity is down in apathy. And so Stephen himself is someone who's really lives far more upgrade. Personality wise, he would score much higher on the expressive side of things and the driver side of things. So he's really quite focused to get stuff done. And he's always about, let's have a good time. Let's keep a really, energized kind of frame around whatever's going on. But when it comes to this particular activity, this activity is down in apathy. And so obviously that's is very out of type for Stephen. So he may very well feel it. Um, let's see. Internally, he might be very unforgiving, but he's keeping it quite private. And he might be very moody and negative about why is this on his plate. But the truth is, we're a small company and someone's got to do it, and he's chosen. So there you go. Although, really, whoever answers the phone can more than easily answer these questions. All right. So, again, I just want you guys, I wanted to do this just so you could get a little bit of comfort around using the comprehensive adjective map. Now, in this afternoon session, we will be talking about how to use this to determine ideal locations. But in the time we have remaining for the morning session, I want to make sure we get into that engagement ring layer in a good deal of detail. Okay, now again, for those of you who did have someone complete a change grid, if you feel comfortable allowing us to share that with the whole audience, we'd love to show your change grid on screen and discuss it a little bit, or let you try your hand at telling us what you see in the change grid. And so, if you'd like to do that, just please chat a little note over to us, and Stephen will talk to you privately to do whatever he needs to get that all set up for it. Okay, so with that, let's go ahead and we will temporarily leave the adjective map and let's get back to this profile. Now, it might have timed me out, but let's see if it'll let me go to the engagement layer ring, layer 8. Oh, nope, timed me out. The system gives you about 20 minutes or so. If you haven't done anything at all for 20 minutes, it thinks you've walked away from it. So but we just go back. In fact, let me, instead of hurrying through that, I logged into the system. I went to the dashboard and looked under View Profiles. So this is where I find my list of all the profiles that I've ever created. And they stay on here until I delete them, and I can change the order of them and whatever else I really need to do. But this particular one that we had Stephen fill out was for this research assistant kind of role, which technically isn't his job, by the way. But we were hiring someone to do this task list, and so we had to get some decisions made about what that role would actually include. And now we have someone who does this work. But yeah, this was Stephen's profile. Yeah, nope, that's not Stephen's. That's the other person. One moment. Let's go back, view the profiles. And so it is this one. Yep. And what I'm waiting for is for the current location numbers to come clicking in because I know what Stevens look like. So again, I want to see all activities. That's what we're playing with right now. I want to view the change grid on screen. So click on view change grid. Up comes the change grid. And now I'd like to look specifically at the engagement ring layer, so I can swap out the background and do that. Now, again, as you play with the ChangeWorks system, down below there's a whole way you can generate a report as a PDF file, and you can decide what pages it's going to include or not include. And then below that, there's all the email controls. So do you want to email the report to your client? What do you want to do and when do you want it all to have happen? So you have complete control over a great many aspects of generating reports, looking at reports, and distributing reports. Okay, anyway, so here's the easiest thing. Let's look at it on screen. So right now, we are looking at the same activity set, and now we're going to determine how engaged is Stephen in this particular case in doing these activities. So take a look at this layer and look at the labels that are scattered about it. I want to talk about each one of those layers so you understand what's going on. Now, people that work particularly with large organizational clients, are encountering this concept of engagement more and more. For at least the past 5-10 years, there have been many an organization that has hired a consulting firm to come in and perform some sort of an analysis about the level of engagement the employees have in the work that they're doing and the company they're doing it for. And lots of different tools have been developed to assess employee engagement. It's all perfectly fascinating. But what they are all doing is looking at engagement at a very high level. And so the kinds of things that they are connecting with higher levels of employee engagement is like an employee feeling as though they're doing meaningful work, or an employee liking their coworkers, or feeling respected by management, or being included in decisions that need to be made. And so there's all these kind of like high level sort of generalized thoughts, feelings, opportunities, behaviors, whatever, that they kind of look at as a set of kind of hallmarks for an organization with high employee engagement. And I think that's all really great stuff. And I certainly agree with you that any employee who is engaged at a high level is likely to be more productive than an employee who is disengaged. That being said, I don't know that that answers the question that my clients really have, or that even I have as I am working with an employee or with a team of people. My question isn't, are they engaged at a high level? I want to know, are they engaged when it comes to doing the actual tasks that we hired them to do? And this becomes a really big issue with executives when I say to them, how do you feel about employee engagement? And we talk about this difference between engagement at the high general sorts of levels versus engagement at the activity specific level. And they end up saying like, well, I certainly want my employees to be, happy and feel a part of what's really going on, etc. But I need them to do the work we hired them to do. So, how many of you recognize that it is very possible for someone to be engaged at a high level, but still be quite disengaged with any or all of the line items on their job description? So, for example, Stephen is very engaged in the work that we do, but his grid shows that certain activities are falling out of that area where engagement naturally occurs. So obviously, if I want to do good performance coaching, I want maximum productivity. I want high levels of performance. I want people to be living to their potential. I got to keep them engaged, and I got to keep them engaged in the actual work that we hired them to do. And so when I look at a change grid, I want you to just lock this in. We are looking at their level of engagement at the activity specific level. And as far as we know, and we research this continuously, this is the only tool in existence that allows that to happen because, as far as we know, this is the only tool that allows the client to create their own activity list. So they get to decide what they want people to be engaged around doing, and whether that's completing a report, showing up on time, keeping their mouth shut with the media, they get to decide. They get to say it the way they want to say it. And then the change grid will answer this engagement question among the four key questions the change grid is designed to answer. Okay, so do you guys get the difference between engagement at a high level and engagement at the activity specific level? Yep. In fact, let me put this to the litmus test to make sure you all get this. You all run small businesses. So I don't know if you have employees or if you are going to be hiring one. I don't know if they're going to be part-time, full-time, or you're using even kind of like a remote electronic assistant. Do you want is it more important to you that the person you hire be engaged at general level so they see your mission, they believe in your vision, they really resonate with everything you got going for you, they like you and they like whatever it is that they're doing overall? Or would you rather them get engaged at doing the actual tasks you hired them to do? And so what we want is both of those things, but so often we end up with people who are engaged at a high level but really aren't engaged when it comes to doing the tasks that need to be done. And lest you think that's limited to other people's behavior, let's self-apply this concept for a second. How many of you would have no doubt in your mind that you are fully engaged at a high level when it comes to the work that you've chosen to do? You do see your mission and the vision, the purpose. You do know how important it is, and you get all of the accolades and all of the reward. And, at a high level, you're all engaged. You wouldn't do it. That being said, how many of you have got your own little list of mission critical activities that you've got to do to keep your business thriving? And the truth be told, you do not enjoy doing a great many of those activities. So it is, you don't need to go far from home to find plenty of evidence to support this truth that it is very possible to be engaged at a high level and still not do those activities that are critical for your mission to ever be fulfilled. Okay. Oh, this is great. Getting lots of comments here. So engage in the task, get the work done. Execution is really what I want. This is right. Do the actual tasks well and on time. Is that too much to ask for? uh, single shingle. If I had a resource, I'd like both. Right. Exactly. We want them both. But if I can only choose one, I need them to do the work I hired them to do. So, yep, you guys are doing this. Yep. Record keeping, invoicing. Yeah. The traveling. We've all got our little tedium am. Bob is sharing here. I know what it feels like to fail to do some of the things I don't love. Exactly. So this is the distinction. Thanks, Ronnie, for that. This is the distinction we're trying to do. This is just the truth. And so if I am a manager trying to get the greatest results out of my people, or I'm the business owner trying to get the greatest results out of my whole company, or I'm just me trying to get the best results out of me, I need to understand what's going on with my level of engagement at the activity specific level. And that's what this layer is designed to do. So let's take a look at the labels on this layer and look at those little areas so you know what's really happening here. We'll start very far out grid, which is over there to the right, and you see the word execution. Now, execution means you're killing it. So you're getting that job done. You're getting it done in that moment. Check it off your list, you know? So you're executing on the task. It means it's being, absolutely completed. Keep in mind that the word execution has many meanings. Among those meanings is killing something else too. So the execution is very far out grid in that driven driver kind of energy area. And again, if we looked at the adjective map, you might find a whole lot of words there you're not too comfortable with. In fact, we happen to have the adjective map handy, I do believe. Let me just go to that outgrid danger zone for a second, and I'll show you what's bad about being that far outgrid when execution can become real problematic. The amiable driver, yep, the analytical driver. Now we get to the driven driver, yep. Okay, let me just scroll up a little bit so you can see all the words here. All right, so if you are too far outgrid, that execution can end up coming across as confrontational, destructive, evil, wicked, warmongering, bossy, dictating, exploitive, inflexible, rude, autocratic, brutal, arrogant, domineering, unyielding. I mean, are you seeing some adjectives here that you don't want to personally experience? You don't want to be around? You don't want to cultivate, demonstrate, support? I mean, there's a lot of ick out here. And again, remember the ChangeGrid has a spot on it for every single possible human attitude, belief, behavior. And so there are times when humans can be very, very ugly creatures. And on this adjective map, you will find those words that describe us at our worst. And some of those occur when we are in this extremely far outgrid kind of section. Now we say, you may very well be executing on the task, but what are you doing to the relationships around you? Are you killing them too? Or what are you doing about your own reputation among the people that you are leading? Are you drawing them closer to you? Are you creating a wall? What are you killing out here? And so there's a very dangerous aspect to being too far out grid. And again, this is why we want you to see the adjective map. That said, let me give this to you as a warning. And if you don't heed the warning, then you're going to hear exactly what I'm going to say to you, but it's going to come out of your client's mouth. Um, Whenever you must never give the adjective map to a client. There's a mini version of it that is client safe. This full comprehensive adjective map is not client safe. And what I mean by that is this: if you hand this to a client and you allow them to see all the words that are surrounding certain coordinate pairs, they might become extremely defensive. They might take offense to the fact that we are saying this is how they're behaving. I mean, can you imagine if you had someone who believed their level of ability was an 11 and they were conquering a challenge of an 11? That puts them in this outgrid danger zone, in this extremely driven driver kind of area. And yeah, they can come across as being very demanding, dominating, manipulative, unsympathetic, brutal, autocratic, bossy, controlling, intolerant, destructive, bigoted, warmongering. I mean, this is not a human being in their finest moment. Nevertheless, that could happen, and they could be executing not more than not just the task, but the relationships and reputation, around them. Let's see. Okay, so that's again just what I wanted to show you around this one. All right, so let's see. Going back now. So execution. Now, execution is actually just a dramatic expression of engagement, or it might be like that final step of engagement. And if you look then right immediately to the left of execution, you see the little engagement band. So whenever someone's plotting, in this area on the change grid, they are engaged. They are actively doing those things that lead to them successfully, completing whatever the task is or reaching whatever the outcome happened to be. Now, engagement is preceded by intention. And so, a little further left, intention. Until I have an intention to do something, if I'm engaged in doing it, it's accidental. So the moment I intentionally choose to engage myself around a particular activity, now I'm being very deliberate. I'm being very calculated. I'm working on whatever my mission happens to be. And so, before anyone can become engaged in doing anything, there needs to be some sort of intention. And we'll talk about some of the differences and the different spots, upgrade and downgrade, but you get it. It precedes by an intention. So, any of these activities that Stephen has plotting an intention, he has a very strong intention to do something around it, or he believes it could be a good thing to do. So there's this intention there, but that intention has not become engagement yet. So intending to do something and doing it are different things. We all know that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So having an intention in and of itself changes very little, if anything, about the actual outcome. Now, intention is preceded by awareness. So until I'm aware of something, how can I even form an intention so that I can ultimately get engaged and finish what I've started? So we've got this awareness band. Now, any of the activities that are plotting in awareness, we can say, well, this person is aware that this situation is happening or this activity needs to be done, or they're aware of what this activity is. But awareness isn't even an intention. So it might be a moment of insight, but there's no action involved in awareness. I need to now get moving, and so I go from awareness into having an intention, and then I move into engagement and start actually moving, doing those things that need to be done until I can ultimately finish whatever I've started. Now, awareness has a couple of rather severe expressions as well. And so we kind of pulled them out just to bring a little bit more attention to where they occur. But hyper awareness and hypo awareness, in just a couple of moments, I will tell you what those things all mean. But you get the idea. There's awareness, and sometimes that awareness can be pretty severe. And then all that goes further to the left of that, we put pre aware because we don't know what other word would be there. I mean, you're not even aware of it yet. So maybe you're aware of it at some primal kind of level, but you're not aware of it in a cognitive kind of way. So everything over there is just pre-aware. So it's also the land of joyous oblivion. It's like people don't know really what's going on over there. All right. So with that now. Let me just check in and see. Do you guys kind of get this progression that we go from having awareness to formulating some sort of an intention? That intention becomes engagement. That engagement becomes execution. Y'all with me on this? And if someone was on their own path of great development, these are probably the steps we bring them through. Like if those are they're working with people in coaching. Now, again, we specifically do performance coaching, but I think this is going to apply to all the different types of coaching and managing and teaching and whatever else you might be doing. So we need to make sure people are aware of things. But our goal isn't just to leave them with awareness. We'd like them to have some connection to what we've now made them aware of or what they've now become aware of. And hopefully that connection is going to stimulate them to want something to be different, that now there's an intention that's starting to form. Well, ultimately, that intention needs to give way to engagement. They need to now say, not only do I intend to do something, I'm doing it. And we don't want people to just get lost in the doing of things. We'd like them to finish the things that they've started so they get to whatever their destination happens to be. So we kind of think of this as being a very standard, typical developmental plan. Now, we can't leave well enough alone. When you apply this concept to tension management, or you apply tension management to this concept, then a broader range of possibilities arises. And so instead of just looking at these bands as being these, simple 4 or 5 steps, we want you to notice where in that band you might be plotting. For example, when it comes to awareness, you could be very far up grid or you could be very far down grid and still have awareness of what's going on. So, what's the difference between up grid awareness and down grid awareness? Similarly, when we move into intention, intention is sufficiently tall that there is an up grid sort of intention and there's a down grid sort of intention. Even engagement, there's an up grid expression of engagement, and there are ways that engagement expresses itself in a more down grid sort of way. You get to execution, we kind of think, well, execution's execution, so I don't know that I need to make much of a distinction. But for those other bands, looking at what happens when your level of tension is high, when you're up grid, or when your tension is low, when you're down grid, ends up being a pretty interesting thing to take a look at. Let's see if I'm getting some comments here. Yep, yep, yep. Okay. Yeah. All right. So now let's talk about upgrid awareness. In fact, let's label the most upgrid awareness you can have as hyper awareness. Hyper awareness is a situation that has thrust itself into your reality, and it is so in your face, it is so intense, it is so immediate, and it's demanding your attention. So, hyper awareness is this inescapable level of awareness. One moment, sorry. All right, so allergies. So, we've all had our moments of hyper awareness. And in that moment, every single bit of our physical and our emotional and our intellectual self is consumed by whatever that thing is. So, can you all relate to hyper awareness? Yes, would be reassuring at this point. Yep, yep, yep. Some of you guys are suggesting some things like that, like a tax audit could make you very hyper aware. Yep, and even there's even more. You get into a life or death situation, very much hyper aware of what's going on. Okay, pardon me. Let's go to the other extreme. Let's go to the bottom of the change grid, hypo aware. Now, again, you guys should have enough comfort with the basic places on the change grid by now that you know the level of tension that's down there where hypo aware is apathy, and so that should match up very easily for you. It was not a big test on us when we realized that this layer of the change grid would overlay on the levels of tension. So integrating these maps of humanity was pretty straightforward. All right, so hypo awareness. Hypo-awareness means that this situation is happening below your conscious awareness. So perhaps at an unconscious, subconscious level, your body or yourself is aware that something is happening. But it really isn't something that is demanding your attention. So, for example, I believe that while you are sleeping, your body is still monitoring the environment around it, and so I think that it's gets more sensitive about sounds that are going on around it, or whatever the case may be. So I don't think we completely shut off our senses because we go to sleep. Our senses are still working, but they are working below our conscious awareness. So it picks up on something, and depending on how significant what it picks up on may be to us, it may choose to awaken us a little bit, raise our level of tension so we become a little bit more conscious, and life goes on. So let me give you an example of this. You wake up in the morning, and before your eyes are even open, your ears detect the sound of rain hitting the window. And you think to yourself, it's raining. This is downgrade awareness. You are now aware of something that really doesn't threaten you, really doesn't cause you anything much at all. Maybe it's not even really all that curious. So it's not demanding any of your attention. It doesn't need any of your attention. It's just this thing that now you're aware of. I just looked out the window. I see that the leaves are blowing around a little bit. So this is a downgrade awareness. Okay, yeah, the leaves are blowing around. How does this affect me? And so this is downgrade awareness. Now, so let me just check in. Can you guys feel the difference between upgrade awareness and downgrid awareness? Let's check in on that. Okay. Yeah. Sneaking suspicion. That's a downgrade awareness as well. All right. So now, if I look at Stephen's change grid, none of these activities are plotting up in hyper awareness. So none of these things are so demanding of his attention that he's transfixed upon them. That's not happening. But look at all these things that are slipping down into downgrade awareness and even under his radar, hypo awareness, where he's not paying any conscious attention to these things at all. So is it a quantum leap for me to say Stephen is disengaged when it comes to these activities that are quite far downgrid? Now, that doesn't mean he's not doing them. He's doing them, and he's doing them well enough. He's meeting, minimum performance standards. He's passing muster. So, is it possible for someone with downgrid awareness to still go through the motions, do the tasks in some kind of habitual, perfunctory kind of way? No, people can do all kinds of things and do all kinds of things quite well that far downgrid. In fact, workers on assembly lines have live in this area of the change grid. They've got a very high level of ability to do whatever task they've been assigned to do. It's not particularly challenging, and so they're not really. It's not demanding all that much of their attention, but so they can kind of do it automatically. Or how many of you know people? In fact, we have a friend who is a crocheter, and Isabel is an amazing crocheter. She doesn't crochet little tiny doilies. No, no, no. She makes bedspreads for king size beds that drape down and cascade onto the floor. There's with elaborate patterns all throughout it, and she can crank one of these things out in a matter of a week's time. And again, it's a king size bedspread that's been completely crocheted, and she can do the entire thing while she's watching TV. She doesn't even need to be looking at what she's doing. She is so good at crocheting that she can just crank it all out quite on autopilot. So, where is she on the change grid? She's there. Now, some might say that she's got to be engaged or she wouldn't be doing it. And I'm saying that it's the equivalent to her of twiddling her thumbs. It's just giving her something to keep herself, her hands busy while her mind is off on entirely different things. So I would say mentally she's engaged in something else, but physically she's got enough muscle memory to be able to do this on autopilot. So I don't want you guys to think for one moment that there is no productivity when someone becomes disengaged, but they're disengaged. And that means that they're not looking for ways to do it better, faster. They're not leveraging it for something that's more valuable to themselves or others. This is not where growth occurs. This is where we end up after the growth experience has come to a bit of a conclusion. And so, but he is fully aware of these things and that. Now, so let's see. Anybody questions, comments about that? Let's see. What about mindfulness? Well, if we're talking about mindfulness as an adjective, it does not live downgrid. Mindfulness requires a bit of conscious involvement. So we want someone to. In fact, I'd probably put mindful closer to the center of the change grid, slightly out grid because there's an element of responsibility with mindfulness. So that's where we would put it based on the definition I've just provided. So there's no mindfulness down here. If he was truly mindful, we'd be up here with more intention and engagement. That's where we would be. So no, no, no. So again, that doesn't mean people can't get it done, but don't mistake someone who is performing a task adequately for someone who is engaged in the task. So engagement, let's take it to the next level. Engagement, let's have some initiative. Let's look for ways to polish up, improve it, etc. Okay, anyway, so now moving in grid, out grid, now we come to intention. And intention is sufficiently tall that we want to talk about upgrid intention versus downgrid intention. So intention just means this person has said, yes, this is something that I am choosing to do. That's my intention. I'm going to do this. Now, upgrade intention sounds like this. Yeah, I'm going to do this. This is really going to be great. Yeah, wow, this is so, I mean, I just can't wait to dot, 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 dot. So there's a lot more of that expressive energy and that driver energy that's happening up there. Remember I said that you're getting on that border of that driver energy and expressive, the expressive driver, the driven expressive. That's what's happening on layer 5 there. And so the person with upgrade intention is enthusiastic and they want to get started. I'm going to do this. Let's make all this happen. This is going to be the greatest thing. Mind you, they're not really doing anything, but that's their mindset around at that point in time. How wonderful! And so, or they could also be being very creative around avoiding something, but they're doing it with great enthusiasm and passion and creativity and all that. Because again, this is about the Infusionsoft thing, and that's where Stephen is. Strong intention, right on the edge of engagement. We know that it's something that he intends to do. He acknowledges that, big smile on his face, enthusiastic around it. We got to get him to actually do it. And so, look how close he is to that border between intention and engagement. Oh, if we could just move him a little bit, oh, it'd be so much better. Um, that's upgrade intention. Now, downgrade intention is also possible, and it sounds very different. Downgrade intention is, you know, maybe someday it would be good if somebody did XYZ. So the intention is one that's really more thrown out there for the general world's response. It's like, yes, the world should do that. Yes, perhaps someday the grand we or the grand they should take care of whatever this issue is. Or, yes, life could be different if X happened. So there's a little bit, it's like you're past the awareness. You now have a little bit more energy, and now you're saying, I am aware of this, and I think there'd be a good way to go about doing this. There'd be merit in thinking about this. So we're hearing these little whispers of intention, but energetically it feels very different than the person who is up there with that enthusiasm and passion. Now, part of what's happening is that the level of tension that we would find on layer one there is power apathy. In power apathy, people are saying, I know I need to do something. I just wish someone else would do it. And so modify that a little bit. I know there'd be benefit in someone doing something, but I wish it wasn't me. I don't want it to be me. So maybe someone else can do it. And I'll just kind of encourage them or whatever. So that downgrade intention is really something that doesn't bring out the passion in the individual. Okay, so can you guys feel the difference between upgrid intention and downgrid intention? Yep. Yeah, let's see. Betty's sharing here. For growth to happen, does the individual have to be at the engagement level? Well, I honestly think that growth begins to happen as we approach power from any direction. So I think of growth as being more a stopping point along a continuum. So growth is happening. I don't know that growth is really happening upgrid or downgrid, but I would say this to you that learning happens all over the change grid. So sometimes the lessons are very unpleasant for us to learn, and others we're eager to learn. But learning happens everywhere. Learning, I think, is part of growth. And so, but where is real? When I think about deliberate, conscious growth happening, it needs to be here where there is more mid grid, that I am making my own proclamations of my intentions, that I am getting engaged, I am completing what's really going on. That's what I think of when I talk about me being the person who's governing my growth, my forward movement on there. So it does have to be the engagement level. No, I would say they need to be somewhere between engagement and execution, but certainly, again, people can still perform. The question is, are they performing at the absolute best place to offer you maximum performance, maximum productivity, maximum benefit? And that would definitely be further outgrid, engagement, and execution is where we'd want someone to be. Not too far out in execution, though, as I said earlier. Great questions you guys are asking. Very good. Okay, yeah. All right. So now let's go on to engagement. So engagement again is means we're actively doing those things that need to be done. And when I'm mid-grid, when I'm in power, I'm simply, logically mapping out what needs to be done, and I'm naturally following through and doing those things that need to be done. Now, there's also though sufficient height and engagement to say, well, let's look what's happening if someone is upgrid or someone is downgrid. Now, in all fairness, engagement, even in its most upgrid moment, is still in power stress. There's no stress up there. And likewise, engagement at its lowest moment of tension, it's not really down in apathy. It's barely, power apathy. So there's plenty of productive tension throughout all of engagement. Nevertheless, there are some differences between plotting upgrid in engagement and downgrid in engagement. So upgrade engagement is like the person is in it to win it. You can see them taking action, and you can see how inspired and motivated and energized they are. They are rallying people around them, sharing and supporting. I mean, there's really a very visual, noticeable set of behaviors and set of facial expressions and tonal qualities that come out when someone is upgrade engagement. They're really actively cheering themselves on, their cause on. They're selling it, they're selling others. They're really in it, really, really in it. So hopefully you guys can connect with what I'm describing there. Now, downgrade engagement, on the other hand, I think is demonstrated very well by the proverbial scientist sitting at their microscope that get lost in their work, and hours go by, and they are totally mesmerized in whatever it is that they are doing. Is this person engaged? You better believe it. But their engagement is very quiet. It's very subtle. It's a very personal, internal sort of an experience of engagement. Now, they can be just as engaged as the person who is in upgrade engagement, who's enthusiastic and passionate. But instead of expressing that engagement in such an outward way, the engagement is very much inward. And so they're lost in the work, fascinated by it, just really losing time in it, doing it like that. So, can you guys feel the difference between upgrade engagement and downgrade engagement? Yeah. Yeah, yeah, Bob is sharing. It doesn't sound much different than execution. Well, again, execution is just to us a severe level of engagement. When I think of execution, I think that for simple tasks, it is where the task gets performed best and quickest. But it does not all tasks that a situation requires the individual to have an ability of 10. Maybe their ability is 9, and right there, they would be where Stephen is plotting at 12. That's a great spot. Let's look at coordinates 9 and 9. Let's look at activity number 12. Activity number 12 is enrolling the prospect in the professional training. So when it comes to that, Stephen's right smack dab in the middle of that whole driver energy. So he's a balanced driver around it, fully engaged, right on the edge of execution. So that activity could happen very, very well right there. Now, if if he detects someone's on the fence or whatever, like anyone who's good at sales, I would hope that he would boost his sense of ability by a little bit to handle that little bit higher level of challenge. And now he's definitely in that execution spot. But I think that as long as someone is plotting anywhere in engagement or the in-grid side of execution, I think we've got a really, really good situation that we're looking at there. In fact, if I wanted to keep my employees fully engaged, look what I would do. I would want to make sure that they've got a nice, strong level of ability. So I want them to have an ability of 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I want them to have a solid level of ability. So if I want my people to be engaged, let me make sure I'm equipping them for success. Now, I don't need to give them everything. I don't need to make them 11s or 12s. Just a nice, solid 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. This would be great. I have that level of ability. But at the same time, I need to make sure that the challenge is high enough to keep the person interested, or high enough that the situation itself is demanding their attention. And so I can't be engaged when my level of challenge is low. There has to be enough challenge. And so 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, great level of challenge. When you put those two things together, give me a solid level of ability and give me a challenge that puts that ability to the test. Or give me a test and then equip me with the ability necessary to do that, and I'll be engaged. I'll execute. Now, there's always that trump card we said earlier. It's got to be important to the person. If it's not important to them, then it's not important to them. So it might not actually even be on their grid, or it's way deep in the bottom of their cube and they're not going to get around to it. Okay, so hopefully that answered the question. If I really want to keep everyone engaged, I need the activities to all be plotting in this engagement area, this execution area as well. So I look at Stephen's grid and I go, all right, of these 15 activities, I'm only seeing 3 of them are where I want them to be as far as engagement or execution. And I got a couple that are really close to it, so that's good. But what do I need to do around these other activities? Well, in Stephen's case, what's happened is that he's developed plenty of ability to do all of the set, but it's just not very challenging for him anymore. So it's not interesting as it once was. It's not demanding as it once was. And again, that importance thing comes along and messes things up even further. So, what do I need to do in order to get Stephen engaged? I need to do something to boost his perceived level of challenge. So, and we'll talk about again how to do that specifically after lunch, but he needs something to kind of boost that level of energy he has around these tasks. Now, one thing I'll say in more detail this afternoon is that where someone is plotting on the change grid reflects um, where their what the source is of whatever their struggle may be. And I don't want to get into full detail right now, but let me just say this: that the reason why Stephen is down grid is because Stephen has not been managed properly. And so this grid is actually more of a reflection on me than it is a reflection on Stephen. So the way people end up down grid is because they've been given plenty of ability and lots of opportunity to exercise that ability so they can actually develop competencies and strengths and ultimately mastery around these things. Well, Stephen's grid shows plenty of competency and plenty of strength and plenty of mastery. My job as a manager is to make sure that I am always getting a return on the investment that we've made in giving him that ability to do that, or giving him the opportunity to develop that ability to do the kind of job that he's doing. My job is to make sure that the level of challenge is kept sufficiently high on an ongoing basis that he doesn't get bored or that he doesn't feel overqualified for what he's being asked to do, or he doesn't feel underutilized or whatever the case may be. So I'm the one who needed to have kept that level of challenge high. So people end up plotting too far down grid because there is a management issue, or as probably more accurately, a lack of management input. And so this is why I said to you that the change grid is descriptive. It's going to tell me what's going on with the person. It is predictive. It's telling me what they're likely to do next, and it's prescriptive. It tells me what it is I need to do in order to help this individual get on track and keep themselves on track. So this afternoon, I'll tell you specifically what it is that I could be doing with Stephen to get him to move from this downgrid awareness and downgrid intention back out there to be fully engaged in executing on these tasks. All right, let me check in with you guys. So, was what I just described, did that all, was that interesting? Did that make sense? Let's see. Got some questions coming in. Could the downgrade movement and engagement be compared to finding flow, our sweet spot? Well, technically, if we stay strict to Csikszentmihalyi's definition of flow, he would say that flow occurs when your level of ability and the level of challenge, although I think he said demand, are in perfect balance with one another. That's when flow is going to be maximally experienced. So you would actually have to be on what we call the heart line. So you got coordinates straight across the center of the change grid. So Stephen would be on the heart line for activities number 3 and 12 and 14 because he's at 8 8 for that one, 9 9 for number 12, and 10 10 for number 14. So there's a perfect balance between um, the perception of ability and the perception of challenge. So that would be meeting the requirement for the strict definition of flow. That being said, if I'm plotting a little bit further downgrade, now there's an ease that's coming along with the whole thing. My level of ability is still high, but the challenge is starting to come down a little bit. So I am no longer in the rapids for the first time trying to figure out how I'm going to navigate this raging river that I'm on. Now it's more like I've been on this river before before. I've been on this river many times. And yes, it's a river of great challenge, but at least I figured out some of the best routes to take. And so now the level of ability is actually a bit higher than the level of challenge. And he would end up plotting where you're suggesting, which is the downgrid maneuver in engagement right here. Now things have become a little bit more of a process, a science, a routine. But would we call that finding flow? According to Csikszentmihalyi's work, Stephen would actually be falling out of flow because his level of challenge is not high enough to create that perfect flow state. My personal opinion is that he's flowing pretty well right there. He's getting it done. It's interesting enough that he's still engaged. I'd be very happy if this activity set just found its little home in that downgrid engagement kind of area because he knows this stuff. I can't come along and change the standards and change the task so much that it moves him up into stress because the job in many ways is what it is. Okay, let's see, getting some other comments here. Your use of the word challenge helped me see this more fully. Thanks. Okay, good, good. Yep, challenge or difficulty. Could Stephen be downgraded because he has too many responsibilities? Well, again, Stephen is not downgrid. A person is not downgrid. The activities are downgrid. Stephen, as a person, tends to live more upgrid and more outgrid. So his normal way of being is to be that expressive driver driven expressive type. And so if you haven't talked to him on the phone, he's very knowledgeable. He is a subject matter expert, but he's also very charming and he's always laughing and always has a smile on his face. And sometimes it's really quite irritating, but that's how he is. And so this is Stephen's real nature. So Stephen is not downgrid because he has too many responsibilities. Stephen's just Stephen, but those responsibilities, and he has a great many of them, are scattered hither and yon all across the change grid. And some of those things he's very engaged around doing, and some of those things, nope, he's plotting downgrid, down in power apathy and apathy, down in downgrid intention and awareness because the challenge is gone or going fast. Let's see, it's time for our lunch break. So let me just kind of make sure I've addressed your questions. Okay, I'm getting a lot of makes sense. Very interesting. Looking forward to learning how to move people around. Okay, good, good, good. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and bring this call to a close. I'll take our little 30-minute break for lunch. So we'll be back at the top of the hour, everyone. So talk to you again at 1 o'clock. Bye for now.